And as you see on the screen, a special shout out to our sponsors who allow us to put these programs together. All right, I think we will, yes, officially get started now. An official welcome to all of you. So glad you could be here with us. My name is Tara Jackson. I have the honor of serving as president of the Arizona Town Hall, a nonprofit organization that's been around for over 60 years, working to create education, understanding, connection, empowerment, and most of all, solutions for all the issues that not only come up for Arizona's communities, but far beyond. And that is especially true with this program and this series of programs put together by our International Relations Committee. And before we get started with the content of the program, you saw the slide as you came in. I want to give a special shout out to our financial sponsor for this series of really informative programs this year, the Nelson Family Charitable Trust. And it has been an amazing set of programs this year. If you have not seen some of them, we record them all and they are on our website and our YouTube channel. This year we have focused on workforce development and issues relating to it, not only with this particular group who does programs with Mexico and Canada and other international groups, but as well throughout Arizona. I am extremely excited to learn from the program today, and this is our last program of the calendar year 2025, and it should be a very interesting one for everyone. These programs have been put together by an amazing person who's done this all year long. She is the chair of our International Relations Committee, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Linda Elliott-Nelson to tell you about the program. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you, Tara. It seems like this year, everybody's talking about tariffs. So this program will be focusing on tariffs. This is the 6th forum that we have had this year on cross-border connecting, and we're especially honored because this forum can include Canada as well as the United States and Mexico. Our moderator for this program is an export and import and exports. His name is Fernando Sandoval. He has a BS in marketing from the Instituto Tecnológico y de Estudios Superiores de Monterrey and the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, and a Master's of International Management from Thunderbird Graduate School of International Management. He is a licensed customs broker, certified customs specialist, and NCB FAA National Educational Institute. He has 28 years in international business experience in the United States, Mexico, South America, and Europe, working for companies such as the Coca-Cola Company, Kellogg's, Rubbermaid, BOC Healthcare, and Del Campo Supreme, co-founder and managing partner of Martinez U.S. Customs Brokers, Inc., and Border Tech, which are import-export services. Please welcome Fernando Sandoval.
Thank you. Okay, get going. Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, Linda and Tara, and to Arizona Town Hall for the invitation. I like to now start by recognizing my colleagues in the panel, Mr. Hector Placencia, Mr. Glenn Williamson, and I'll start with introducing Hector Placencia. Hector is located in Phoenix right now, but he is a frequent cross-border traveler because he does business in Hermosillo, mostly in the state of Sonora. Hector is a managing partner and founder of BRH2, which we call BRH2 in Mexico, but BRH2 LLC in the US. And it's a company that does contract manufacturing with a variety of products. I'm sure when we get into the conversation, Hector, and questions come up, Hector is going to share more information. Hector has been doing this for more than 10 years. And previously, he was in charge of doing cross-cultural and multicultural marketing for multiple Fortune 500 companies. So thank you very much, Hector. Please help me in welcoming Hector. Thank you, Hector. And Mr. Williamson, Mr. Glenn Williamson, I'm going to turn over here a little bit to read the first paragraph of his very really cool biography of all the things he has done. But to begin with, Glenn is a former Canadian diplomat. Currently, he is the founder and chief executive officer of the Canada-Arizona Business Council, the CABC. As I said, he's a former diplomat, mentor, and an entrepreneur and public speaker with 35 years of experience in a variety of executive level and board membership positions. Without reading Glenn's bio, I can tell you I've had the opportunity to meet Glenn business meetings, and he is always advocating for USMCA, advocating for cross-border business, US-Canada, Canada-Mexico, US-Mexico, etc. He's also, and he's doing a variety, and I'll, when we get into the conversation, Glenn is going to share more on that based on the questions that we get from the participants, that we hope we get a lot of questions. So with that, I'll start it. Should I start, Linda?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so I would like, I'll start with a brief, some comments, and then I'm going to ask Alex to put on the screen some flowcharts. So as Linda introduced, the topic of the panel is tariffs. And we all know that this year we have been subject and we have been living tariffs. In my specific case and in our specific case, as a U.S. licensed custom broker, probably we are one of the stakeholders that has been most affected by the tariffs, because we've had to deal with multiple changes. We had to deal with multiple learning experiences, basically, on what's going on. Since January 20th of this year, things started changing. The landscape started changing, and it got very complicated. That's the best way to say it, because what in the past, what was one simple line item to do a customs entry. A customs entry is the paperwork that you need to do and import into the U.S., regardless of what country, from which country in the world you want to bring products into the U.S., you have to do a customs entry. And again, the easiest way to share with you what the difference is now is that in the past, let's say this writing pad I have here, it was one line item. Now, that same writing pad can be at least 3 line items for that same product. And in some cases, let me show you this one. My Arizona-Mexico Commission 60th anniversary thermal, made of aluminum. It's made of aluminum. In the past, again, that thermal from the AMC that I have here in my office used to be one single line item to do a customs entry, assuming you're bringing this thermal from another country. It used to be one line item on the customs entry. Now, that same product can be, I don't know, can be close to 10 line items, 8 at minimum. So that, in a nutshell, that is how one way to explain how things have changed with the tariff landscape. The second thing that has changed is this. Previously, we've been used to changes in our industry, and that's normal, because things change. Free trade agreements change, harmonized tariff schedule classifications change also. But what the difference now this time around has been that the changes used to have advance notice. We used to have get a notice that there's a proposed rulemaking. Some XYZ regulation is going to be published in the Federal Register for public comment, and it's going to go into effect in 30 or 60 days. The difference this time around has been that things have been implemented in a couple of days, sometimes 48 hours or less. So that has made it very challenging for us in the industry. At this point, I like to invite my panel colleague Hector to comment from your experience. You're on the trade user side of the process here. We are the ones that do the paperwork. That we work with you actually. But in your case, how have you seen the difference between last year and this year regarding the tariff landscape?
Thanks a lot, Fernando. Yeah, we've seen, again, BRH2 Plastics, we're a manufacturing company, a maquiladora, if you will, in Hermosillo, Sonora. We're 3 hours south of the Arizona-Mexico border. And almost exclusive all the stuff that we do for our strength is doing baby clients, from Bumbo to Tomy and Munchkin, Up a Baby, Jewel Baby. Those are some of the clients that we do. Most of these projects have tooling and fabrication done in China in most cases, but all through Asia, but mostly heavily in China. And then we do a lot of it in Mexico as well. What we're seeing is that it's been an interesting opportunity for especially us on the Mexican side to do, we've increased a lot of production when the tariffs first went into effect, especially when it went over 100% and then it dropped back down. So it's kind of been going, up and down. And so our clients have seen hardly any stability. So their landed cost to bring something in has just gone kind of off the charts. We're seeing it at the consumer level, right? Because these clients are paying more for their goods. And of course that gets passed on to the consumer because they raise the price to the retailer raises the price to the end user, if you will. But from a manufacturing standpoint, it's been an interesting challenge as well. We're seeing clients use different strategies to try to reduce the impact or minimize the impact of tariff. And I'll give just a quick example. For something to qualify under the USMCA, the free trade agreement, it has to be 60% or more produced, or whether it's raw materials, labor, packaging, etc., from North America. So if it's a North American raw material, it qualifies under, as long as it's 60% or greater. But if it drops below that 60% threshold, then you're going to pay that tariff. And so we see on the news, and this is where it's confusing to a lot of people, is they see there's a 25% tariff to Mexico. I'm not sure what it is today. Glenn could probably chime in on Canada's side, but 25% to Mexico tariff. But that doesn't mean everything that comes across the border is 25%. If it's USMCA qualified, then there is no tariff charge, right? So there's zero tariff. And it's been an interesting conversation with a lot of our clients. And we've actually picked up a few new clients as a result because they were getting stuff done exclusively in China. And it's been an opportunity for us BRH2, but really for Mexico in general. There's a huge opportunity, I think, for Canada as well. Glenn, I don't know if you can speak to some of that as well.
I would love to. Can you hear me okay, Hector?
Yes, we can.
Superb. You've touched on a few things that are near and dear to my heart, and I'm going to see if I can walk you through the Canada position with the administration. Above and beyond some very, very strong personal clashes between the administration and Ottawa, we have a series of things that under NAFTA, or CUSMA, as Canada calls it, that have always been there, but now they're accelerated. To your point, Hector, there's an awful lot that is not being touched under USMCA. It's a huge amount under Canada that's not being touched. With that, let's talk about some of the big ones that were a problem and now are becoming even more of a problem. Steel and aluminum. To your point before, Fernando, both of those are huge exports from Canada into the United States. And under this administration's position, they would like to see more of that done in the United States. So they have bumped the tariffs up on Canadian steel and aluminum manufacturers to 50%. And that is a extraordinarily high level of tariffs with an underlying process that they're going to attempt to try and do that in the US. It's a very, very difficult thing to all of a sudden ramp up and make that happen. And that steel and aluminum is going to change the costs of many, many products in the United States. The next big one is softwood lumber. And softwood lumber is going to hit the United States, and very specifically Arizona, in home building. This is going to change the way that they are going to be able to afford that. You're going to see prices go up. And softwood lumber got pummeled as well at 35% tariff. So that has become, another big, big problem. Steel, as we talked about, is going to be integrated into an awful lot of manufacturing. The next one is dairy products. And dairy products, historically, the United States has tried to protect its dairy industry by capping how much dairy can come down from Canada. That continues to be a problem. And that is and has been a long-term negotiation, as the other ones have been. Energy is the next one. And as Alberta is loaded with energy, it didn't get hit as hard. As a matter of fact, it was taken down to a number of 10%. So we see the importance of energy coming into the US. The last one that I'll talk about is automotive products. And that one is near and dear to this administration. They would like to see the automotive industry come back to Detroit from Windsor, Ontario, and that is an extraordinarily painful process that is going on. And you have seen some flare-ups from the Ontario government to the US administration. And that has even caught the attention of the Prime Minister of Canada and saying that I'm not sure I want to go that far and push back. Even after a 51st state comment, it's almost like this has gone back and forth, and tariffs have been a tool in which the political entities on both sides of Canada and the United States are fencing with, and the consumers are paying a dear price for it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm glad we're rolling with this dynamic here, because as Hector and Glenn were speaking, so I wrote a few notes, and there are three things. So politics aside, our concentration from my side is on the technical and procedural part of this process. And, you got to adapt. We all have to adapt to circumstances. So there are three things that started happening this year where, in our case, we had to adapt to, confront the challenges that we have. And the other thing is, if any of you in the audience are, involved directly in import and export, hopefully the following points are going to help you. So the three things I wanted to add to the conversation are inbound bonded cargo, and I'll explain what that is. Inbound transits through the US. Number two, something that's been in the books forever, but people started paying a lot more attention to it right now. And Hector made some comments on that, which is a concept called tariff engineering. And number three, people also started putting a lot more attention, paying a lot more attention to something that's right in the regulations, and it is what it's called General Notes USMCA Rules of Origin. So I'll briefly touch on the three items, and relate to what Hector and Glenn mentioned. First of all, inbounds, bonded cargo. The concept of bonded cargo it's a tool that U.S. Customs has for when you only want to transit product through the U.S. through another country. Example, inbounds started the inbound volume from Mexico to Canada and vice versa started going up significantly this year. Why? Because as Hector said, items that do not qualify for USMCA, even if they're assembled in Canada or assembled in Mexico, they don't qualify for USMCA, they're dutiable at 25%. In the past, when the duty was 1%, 2%, whatever, nobody bothered to go through the procedure and the additional steps you got to take with bonded cargo, with inbounds, that again, only transit through the US. But one thing we see a lot of now is Canadian sub-assemblies. Glenn mentioned the automotive sector. Those Canadian sub-assemblies that are going to be used at an assembly, vehicle assembly place in Mexico are now moving inbound from Canada to Mexico because they're just transiting through the US. Vice versa, products that are assembled in specifically and more so sub-assemblies, a lot of those in the automotive sector, instead of like in the old days, you imported to the US, didn't pay duty or paid a really small percentage. Now that's not happening. Now it's going as a 7512, that's the name of the customs form that is used for sending the cargo transiting through the US. It doesn't stay in the US. It has to leave the US and it goes to Canada. It kind of, it's similar to the duty-free stores at the airports or here at most border towns in the US where the scotch comes in duty-free, no duties because it's not going to stay in the US. It goes to the duty-free store, and if you ever bought it, you notice that there's a security guard there, excuse me, that follows you that you need to leave, walk, or drive into Mexico. That's the regulation. So that's bonded cargo. So that's the first thing. The second thing that people started paying a lot more attention to this year has been tariff engineering. Hector mentioned quite a bit of that in his remarks. Basically, where you look at your bill of materials, which is the list of components that you have on a finished good, and you say, what does the rule of origin tell me about the minimum percentage or the specific rule of origin for a specific product? And what you start doing there, and that started also generating what I see as really positive, is more business within the North American ecosystem, where you start seeing a Mexican company or a US company that was previously sourcing a component from Europe. Now they're looking for a Canadian manufacturer. They're looking for an American manufacturer. They're looking for a Mexican manufacturer, because if they substitute that component that they were previously bringing from Europe into the finished good, then it's going to qualify for USMCA and it's going to be duty-free. The other thing, last but not least, also Glenn mentioned aluminum and steel. That's the other thing we've been seeing increase the amount of inbound bonded cargo shipments from Canada moving inbound to Mexico. And we have seen quite a bit of that also because in addition to the aluminum and steel, the other thing that was implemented as a regulation by the government this year was derivative products. In the past, a sheet of aluminum, a sheet of steel was the one subject to the duty, but right now derivative products are also subject to the duty on the portion that is aluminum, steel, or copper. So what has happened, and more so in the mining industry, there's a really heavy presence of Canadian companies in the mining sector in Mexico, and a lot of them are now recurring to the inbound option to move product from Canada to Mexico, because if you use the inbound, it only transits through the US and it doesn't pay duty. So Hector, is there anything you would like to add to, the adaptation we have all experienced this year?
I think one of the biggest things is well, first of all, I guess I'm going to start because I think there's a question regarding, what is USMCA? So it's the United States, Mexico, Canada, free trade agreement. People knew it before as NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. So USMCA speaks to that. And again, it speaks to what I mentioned and what Fernando and Glenn have talked about as well. If a product is actually 60% a bill of material, 60% or more, from North America, it can cross borders without any kind of a duty fee. And so what we're seeing, at least on my side, from a manufacturing standpoint, our clients have gotten creative, and where things were actually being manufactured in China, they're saying, hey, we can actually get this stuff assembled, get it packaged, do a finished product in Mexico, as long as it reaches that 60%. And we're still, they're bringing components in from China. In some cases, packaging is cheaper in China versus Mexico or US, for example. So we have to bring that in from China. And so we have to be careful to make sure that the bill of material stays within that, 60% or greater North American. And so our clients have now kind of picked up on that so that they don't get that impact, so that their landed cost to the US kind of remains similar to what it's always been, and minimize the impact of the tariff so that they don't have to raise the prices to the retailers. And a segue to that, I think, is, again, before this conference that we're speaking at, we've talked a little bit about, our clients, our brands actually raising prices and taking advantage of tariff opportunity. I think everyone has. I think we've seen raw materials kind of go up where potentially they weren't even impacted by tariffs, but it's an opportunity for everyone to make a little more margin. So as we've seen inflation, it's not all because of tariff. I think it's a combination of things, right? But tariff certainly has impacted a lot of what we're seeing at the retail level when we go to, whether it's the grocery store or go to your, Target, Walmart, what have you, or even Amazon for this case. But again, it's been a great opportunity from a manufacturing standpoint for Canada and Mexico, I think, to pick up some additional business. And so before perhaps we weren't as much in the consideration space, at least I'm talking about my clients. We've seen a lot of increase of production where they're saying, hey, you've got 3 or 4 products that you're doing for us that are actually manufactured in China as well, or Vietnam or Taiwan. Now we want you to increase, some of that production, so that they're trying to minimize their tariff, impact as well. So it's been good for us as a country. And I say us, I mean Mexico, and us as a factory as well. It's been a good thing, but it's also been a bad thing, because one day it'll go up to 100% and then it drops back down. And clients they're savvy, right? They're looking for, where can I get my stuff manufactured for less? And so there's times that we've seen an increase in production, and then when China tariff drops back down to what they consider a reasonable amount, then they'll increase China production. So it's been almost a yo-yo effect that we're seeing. And I know, Fernando, I think you had a chart or a table you wanted to kind of speak to a little bit, even if it's not illustrated. I don't know if Alex can show that, but I think it's important for people to see.
Yes.
The tariff just every day or almost every week is changing. And again, it just speaks to the complexities you're talking about, adapting to it. The clients are having to adapt to it, and us as consumers at the end of the day are having to kind of pay for that impact.
Okay, so thank you, Hector, for bringing that up, and thank you, Alex, for putting that up. And I FYI, I see on the chat there's a question, and I will address that in a few minutes. But first, we're not going to go through this flow chart, but Section 232, and this is related to whomever asked the question about which federal department agency is responsible for administering the tariffs. How is the massive reduction in federal personnel impacting the implementation in tariffs? That's the question, and this is somewhat related to that. So basically there, you see a very complicated flow chart that tells you if A, then this applies, if B, then this does not apply. So, but what you can see there is that, for example, for steel and aluminum articles in their affected derivatives, that's what you got to go through. So you say, hey, if it's steel or aluminum, was the product smelted and cast the raw material in the US, yes or no? If you answer yes, there's one route. If you answer no, it was not smelt and cast in the US, it's another route. And boom, you get there. Then is the product being manufactured in this group of countries is different for a steel and aluminum product being manufactured in Mexico or Canada versus any country in Europe. And there are special additional duties right now too. I can think about Russia and Brazil. For different reasons, Russia and Brazil are on that list that they are subject to a higher duty. Of course, China is subject to a higher duty than other countries. And we can go through the list. The UK has some special arrangement in some items that the rest, that continental Europe does not. So, you know, the UK has it, Ireland does not. For the same product, that's what made it very complicated. As I was commenting in the beginning, what has made this very complicated has been the short notice in implementing what you're seeing on the screen there, and then the research you need to do, because as I said, there are, like, the UK has a special they have a special agreement that Ireland does not have, that continental Europe does not have. So you got to look into the details. And if you are imagine for a purchasing manager right now that's involved with global supply chains, it got very complicated. So that just gives you, we wanted to give you an idea. And then all the little numbers you see there, the 990301, the 990381, et cetera, those are harmonized tariff codes that U.S. Customs, that the U.S. government basically created this year. This year, we haven't concluded the year, and I think we are up at the 25th revision. So we're talking about 25 changes to the harmonized tariff schedule code numbers. In prior years, you would max see 8 or 9, maybe. So now we're seeing at least twice as many revisions. And again, that has complicated the landscape for us and for anyone that's involved in the industry of anyone that's doing import and export has been impacted by this. So thank you, Alex. I don't know. I don't think we need to, if there's another graph, we'll let you know. So, you know, we wanted to share that to let you know how this has impacted the landscape and how complicated that the landscape has been this year. Going to the question, do I click answer live here or? Yeah, okay. I'll answer live. So the federal agency department that's responsible for administering the tariffs. The answer is the agency that implements the technical part, and the technical part is what you just saw, the flow chart with the example of aluminum and steel. That would be U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Now, U.S. Customs and Border Protection is not the agency that determines the policy. The policy as to, for example, why does Brazil pay more in duty for this? Why would you have to pay more in duty for if this thermal came in from Brazil versus from Germany versus from Mexico? Why do we have to pay more if it comes in from Brazil? U.S. Customs is not the one that decided that. that was done more between the U.S. Department of Commerce, the U.S. Trade Representative, and the White House. The way the process has worked, it has been something like this. Theoretically, the Commerce Secretary, the U.S. Trade Representative, do research and determine that this country, like the government of XYZ country, is subsidizing their industries. In turn, those two agencies, the Commerce Secretary and the U.S. Trade Representative, make recommendations to the president. Then the president issues an EO, an executive order. Any of us can go to whitehouse.gov and we can look up the executive orders. Some of them are really short, some of them are really lengthy. And on the executive order, what you're going to read is what's behind the determination to increase duties on Brazil, for example. You're going to read it there, and then the executive order is going to say, by proclamation number XYC, I, the president, determine the following. Then boom, you start reading it, and then U.S. Customs needs to interpret that executive order and implement it in the bunch of numbers you saw a few minutes ago on the flowcharts. That I'm oversimplifying, but that is how it works. I'm going to put here in the chat something that, let's see, or here it is. Something here in the chat that was not existent in the past. Let me see if it goes on. IEPA. I don't know if the participants have heard of the IEPA, or the International Economic Emergency Powers Act. A lot of the tariffs you see right now, the additional tariffs are based on that law, the IEEPA. Many of the tariffs, the increases in tariffs we've seen this year are, and if you read the executive orders, again, whitehouse.gov, go, if you're curious about it, randomly pick an executive order that's related to tariffs, and you are going to, there you go, thank you. And you are gonna better understand what we're speaking about here. How the whole process, what is the process, how it happens. And again, the thing that has been different this year is that in the past that would take 30 to 60 days to be implemented, and now we have to adapt within 48, 72 hours, sometimes a little bit more, like a week, but we have to adapt really, really fast. Many customers have put some shipments on hold until, which we highly recommend when things are so rapid, when changes are so rapid. We've said, hey, let's pause, let's analyze, let's read the executive order, and to make sure we are going to do things in compliance with the regulation, and that you are not gonna neither underpay nor overpay. So it takes a lot of work and a lot of research to understand exactly the regulation and then put it to practice.
Now, there's one thing I want to add, and so that's really good that you explained that. But from a manufacturing standpoint, just as a factory, I think people get the notion that if there's a tariff put on China or Mexico, in this case Canada as well, that the factory, gets what's the word I'm looking for? Has to pay that percentage, and it isn't. It really is the client, the person who's purchasing that product, the end product, to be able to import it, is the one who pays that, and that's why we see that at the retail level.
So I can add in a couple of things that you just mentioned about the White House. You have to remember that all the details of the tariffs are an underlying set of activities to the EOs that are based on other countries tariffing the United States, or the United States deciding that it wants to tariff other countries large enough that they will move operations into the United States. Those are the two fundamental political rationales for that. We bump into this from a Canadian point of view in prescription drugs, where they're being heavily discussed right now with the concept of moving that manufacturing back into the United States. Canadian companies that are bumping into the details of tariffs that you're talking about are now deciding to figure workarounds. And many Canadian companies that get R&D tax credits up in Canada are now bypassing the tariffs by setting up manufacturing entities in the United States and doing distribution in the United States, which, by the way, actually answers part of what the White House wants, but it's the other way of getting around having to deal with tariffs. The aerospace industry is the same thing. It has a 232 overlay to it, and companies like Bombardier in Mexico and other entities in Mexico have interrelationships with Canada to those sub-assemblies that are involved in all those tariffs that eventually get made in the United States. And that complexity has got a lot of people, to your point, unknown as to what's going to transpire. Mexico's agriculture business coming up to Canada is massive. So there was huge discussion on, does that get tariffed coming from Sonora into or Sinaloa into the United States, and then does Canada tariff it on the top end? So these kinds of inconsistencies of tactical implementation of tariff issues has an underlay of complete and absolute confusion by everybody like you guys in the business. That is by design from this administration. And one has to look at it as a negotiating point with other countries. And unfortunately, tariffs are the tool, the equivalent of a sword in a Roman gladiator fight. Who wins and loses is who adjusts their tariffs correctly to make that all work. And I can't even imagine the complexities that you're involved in. I get phone calls from Sobeys and Loblaws in Canada that are going, okay, so what should we be concerned about on the border with agricultural tariffs as we're going through this kind of stuff? And that is a very, very concerning problem that we have not had to deal with before. And Canadian and Arizona specifically is a gateway into Mexico. And as we're watching this unfold, we are watching administrations in Mexico and Canada try to find ways to bypass the United States. That's not going to work. So therefore, these three countries are going to have to sort through this politically and in details that you're all going through. And I'm not sure how that's going to end up, but it is going to be extraordinarily complex. It is not going to be easy. The automotive component, when I sit and talk to Alfonso Darazo in Sonora, the automotive side of this has got Sonora extraordinarily concerned, just as it does Ontario with what's going on in Detroit and how those tariffs are being used to politically maneuver where these products are going to be made, assembled, and distributed. And I think that is going to be the overlay to the attention to details that you're working in.
Yes, I wanted to follow up on something really specific that Glenn, that you just mentioned, agricultural commodities and Arizona and the great state of Arizona in the middle of this. So I am not sure if the statistics I'm going to share, if there's somebody from the Fresh Produce Association participating, they know the numbers better. But what I've heard is something like this. About 70% of the produce consumed during the winter in the United States, and I think in Canada also, about 70% of that produce, because it's Mother Nature, it's a lot warmer down south in a lot of places in Mexico than in Michigan right now and in Iowa. So basically, around 70% of the produce consumed in the US and Canada during the winter is grown, harvested, and packed and shipped from Mexico. And around 70% of that processed through Nogales to where I am right now. So that gives you an idea of the impact the duties with an agricultural commodity, which if you look at the news recently, the administration retracted, even from Brazil, even Brazilian items that were subject to duty of the IEPA duty were excluded. Coffee, bananas, papayas, whatever, but agricultural commodities were excluded. The challenge we have right now in Nogales, and it's also a logistical challenge with our Canadian customers, are the tomatoes, because the tomatoes got subject to an anti-dumping duty right now of around 20%. So that created a challenge for the Canadian, for like Glenn said, a big supermarket chain up there. They're a big player here in Nogales, Loblaws, because they source a lot of their produce through Nogales. So on tomatoes, what do they do? Do they pay the 20% duty where they cannot get a reimbursement, or do inbound? Inbound complicates the scenario because you have to put in more resources to the logistics, but at the end of the day, it comes down to doing a cost analysis. So that's another example of a adaptation strategy that companies have had to put into place and invest on, because you got to decide, what do I do? Do I use the bonded cargo option, or do I pay the tariff? In this case, in this specific case of tomatoes, the anti-dumping duty. So that's another example of what's going on. I'm looking here at my other screen to have some, to look at some additional charts. And yes, like for example, Brazilian items were subject to a 40% additional tariff according to Executive Order 14323. And as I said, around a week ago, the administration exempted the agricultural items because of what it was causing here in our country with inflation, coffee prices, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one example. And yeah, I was saying we've been going through so many revisions here, but I wanted to share that with you, that it's a lot of the changes that have taken place are product specific. Hector, do you have any examples that you would want to share of like a specific product category where you had to adapt this year to how you were doing things in 2024 and before?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple of clients. Bumbo is one of them. Jewel Baby is another. In fact, Jewel Baby was not a client, 8 months ago, 10 months ago. As soon as the tariffs, a lot of the retaliation and all that stuff was kind of going on between China and the U.S., the president of Jewel Baby called me and said, "Hey, can we, come visit your factory? Tell me what you guys do. And I see you do other baby products, brands. And so we're interested in moving some production down there if we can get away from some of the duty fees." And so once I explained the whole, USMCA and the 60/40 rule, right away they shipped. In fact, they flew. Normally they'll send tools because they're very, very heavy. They weigh thousands of pounds, and they usually ship it on a container. But he was in such a hurry to get it to Mexico that he actually flew that stuff, right? And flew a couple of tools down from China down to our factory in Hermosillo. And right away we started producing some products. He got on the plane the very next day. That's how important it was to him, because he knew that his landed cost was just going to go crazy. I think when it first started, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was like at 134% or something crazy, right, out of China. And he said, "Hector, my product doesn't have that price elasticity. So when you see a product, you can kind of tell if it's a $19 product, or if it's a the higher end, if you will, has some room that you can raise the product by $5 or $10 and not see an impact at sales on the retail level." But he says, "My product doesn't have that elasticity. We cater right to that middle class." And And so I can't raise my stuff from $39 to $59 because I'm going to lose massive sales. So right away, he moved the stuff to our factory down in Mexico. We've been producing for him, just going, and we're sending out 3 trailers a week for him to give you an idea. And so he was able to maintain his price at the retail level. So his landed cost remained the same and was able to kind of maintain that to the end user, the consumer. So I think we're seeing, again, an opportunity as I talk about it. So tariff kind of presents itself as an opportunity for these countries, as well as a detriment as well sometimes, right? Because we've seen ups, and then when the tariff, to change a percentage down to a very, low impact, let's call it, then we see our production go down because it raises back up in Asia. So, the one thing that I think our clients are getting used to is the whole lead time, right? The whole just in time. So they know when we're produce something, whether it's in Canada or Mexico, that it's, within, 24 hours, it's actually at the border. And if it's something that's brought across the waters, it's going to take 30 to 45 days to get it through China to Long Beach to whatever that distribution center is, if you will. So time has been played into this as well, and I think we're now a lot more in the consideration space. But the tariff going up and down has really caused kind of wreak havoc on a lot of our clients. So they're having to be a lot more savvy on where do I source this good. But at least Mexico and Canada now are very much in the consideration, where before, not that they weren't, but it was always Asia first and then Mexico, Canada, and the US next. But now we're seeing the nearshore come up as a priority to a lot of folks.
Linda, Alex, can I, as a panelist, I wanted to show to the participants quickly a slide here. Am I able to do that, or do I need to, that's one of on the slide deck that you have, Alex, it would be the very last one that says attachment A, 2025 HTS US revisions. I don't know if you rather you put it up on the screen.
Go ahead and share your screen, Fernando.
Okay, let's see. Okay, here, screen 2. Is it showing up on everybody's?
We can see it.
Okay, perfect. So really quickly, I wanted to share this with you because it gives you a really good idea of how complex this is. Now, it doesn't mean it's impossible to accomplish, because Hector just mentioned success stories. What you have to do, for those of you that are directly involved in this, or you want to learn more about it, is you got to take a dive, as they say, roll up your sleeves, spend a lot of time, study, analyze, read, do your notes, because, from back to the beginning of February and through the year, you can see that things have been modified. And you can see that things have been modified for specific countries and specific product categories. That's what has happened. So you got to stay on top of the changes, because that's part of our job. That's our job. Those of us involved in this, that's our job. We got to stay on top of this. So we find what change took place, what do I need to do to comply with the regulation, and to adjust my strategy. That strategy can be sourcing, that strategy can be assembly, et cetera. But this gives you a pretty good idea of what you need to do. The information is there. Nothing that at least this charts, nothing is proprietary. It's out on the web, on the executive orders, cbp.gov website, Department of Commerce website, the International Trade Administration website. Any of us can look up this information, download it into a PDF, start reading it, and look for our specific situation, our specific product categories. So wanted to make sure before we go ahead let me see at the Q&A here. I don't see any more questions. So just wanted to share that with you, because just to give you an idea, and show you that the information is there. For those of you that are interested in learning more, there you have it. Linda, Tara, do you see? I know we're getting close on noon. I don't know that this is a good time to open up the floor for questions.
Oh, the forum goes until 12:30. So if you would like to open it up to other questions from the Q&A, you can do that, or continue with comments from the panelists.
If I have time for one more comment, if I can, Fernando.
Absolutely.
So here's a really fascinating example, copper. So August 25th, the United States imposed a 50% tariff on copper coming out of Canada. It also simultaneously put it into the rare earth mineral category. The mines in Sonora and in Arizona are primarily owned by Canadians and invested and financed by Canadians. Then this is a tariff nightmare. So you mine it in either Arizona or in Sonora. Then you send it either across the border from Arizona on a train that goes to the port of Guaymas, that then gets on a ship that goes to China to get smelted, and then comes back and re-enters North America. I can't even begin to tell you how many tariffs and discussions are going on back and forth. In the United States, we only have 3 copper smelters. In China, they have 65. So this gets back to that interdependency with Asia, specifically China, and hitting the back and forth from the port of Long Beach and the port of Guaymas on minerals as well, which are super duper important to this region, as well as all of the machinery and all of everything else that goes into that mineral activity, both in Sonora and Arizona. So I just wanted to use that explanation of a supply chain. I can't even imagine what the complexities would be for your business going through that.
And thank you for sharing that, Glenn. And then Hector, after I'll make a couple of comments here, following up on Glenn's example. And maybe you know one of your neighbors from BRH2 in Hermosillo that may do cable assemblies. But basically, following up on Glenn's comment, imagine this. I mean, he explained the whole shebang of the copper. At some point, part of that copper is going to be made a wire. And at some point, that wire is something we all need for our, for our cell phones, for our computer. And there's a high likelihood, that assembly is going to be done in Mexico, perhaps Canada. So the next round of tariff analysis comes in the cost accounting. Our cost accounting colleagues have gotten really busy lately because the regulation says you pay 50% on the copper content that was not, smelted in the US. Okay, so you got to take the bill of materials and say this cable assembly is $10. What part of the $10 is copper? Because a cable assembly, any cable assembly that you can think about, a connector that you use for your computer has plastic, it has terminals, it's not 100% copper. Yet that item was put on the list of copper derivatives, or it can be aluminum derivatives. So you're going to have to figure out, and this got us really busy together with the accounting teams at our customers, because they had to come up with, that's what the regulation says. We will comply with the regulation. And the regulation that we got from customs says 50% duty on the copper content. Okay, that's what it is. So now do the analysis, come up with the numbers, have the backup, your bills of materials, your purchase orders, everything. And that's what I started the conversation by saying that in the past, that cable assembly was one line item on the customs entry. Now it's paid because you got to separate copper content non-copper content. What's the value? What's the weight? So that's what we have gotten into to make this work and adapt. Hector, is there any, anyone or any colleagues that you can think about that are your neighbors at BRH2, where the industrial park is, that are doing this?
Yeah, in fact, that's a good question because one of our clients actually is NAI. They're actually an Arizona-based company, North American Interconnect. They're all in through Hermosillo. They have several factories, and this is exactly what they do, some of the cabling. And so I know that I've heard some of the horror stories from them, where they're sourcing stuff from, how they're handling it, the sub-assembly, the finished product, what have you. And so it is a nightmare for a lot of us in the manufacturing space, right? Trying to get creative where we're going to source this, the raw materials from, and where this stuff is going to end up, right? Where the end user is going to be. And one of the things I wanted to kind of bring up, just a quick segue, is I know several small retailers that it's risky because if they're bringing stuff from Asia and China specific, it's something that maybe can't be produced in Mexico or Canada, and they can't bring it under USMCA. A lot of times we'll try to, get away with trying to, I don't want to say falsify, but the invoices coming out of China have to be real, because I think the U.S. government has caught folks that are saying, it costs me, for example, if this costs, actually, let's assume it's not a cell phone, but if this is something that can be made for $40 and I buy it wholesale for that amount, they're saying, well, I know I'm going to get dutied on it. I'm going to get a duty fee that I have to pay. So can you mark it as $8 that I'm purchasing it for? And of course, when it gets brought into the U.S., some things kind of skate through, and a lot of things don't, right? So the government looks at it and says, there's no way that this is an $8 product, that it's really a $40 plus wholesale price. And so where people are getting caught doing that. So again, it's just it's a cat and mouse thing, it seems like, and it's gotten really messy from what I hear from some of the retailers that have tried to play some of this game. And I always caution them, don't go there, because it's you could lose your license or what have you. But again, you guys, Fernando, as Martinez Brokers, as an example, are in the middle of it, and so you obviously have to make sure that the paperwork is clean, make sure that it's accurate,
Absolutely.
make sure that no one's saying, "Are you sure it costs you $8 and not $40?" Because it will get flagged, and it just really has a negative impact. And I know there's some questions out there as well, predicting the future of tariffs and what's going to happen with it. And right now it's no man's land. No one really knows where this is going to play. I think the geopolitical, climate is driving a lot of it, right? And so as trade negotiations are taking place, if someone upsets another country, then it prompts this or prompts the other, up or down. And so I think that's kind of at least our new future. I think this is what we're probably looking at. This is our new normal, if you will. And so hopefully it's not, forever lasting, but that's what it feels like. And then again, has it been a positive or a negative impact to businesses? I think, from a Mexican standpoint, the tariffs go up for other countries. It's had a positive impact for Mexico for the most part, right? Because there's still a lot of components and raw materials that we have to source out of Mexico or out of North America, and we're having to pay a little additional for that as well as it gets brought into Mexico. And as we transform that product and ship it out, that still goes on to the client, which then goes on to the end user at the very end. So it's pay now or pay later, if you will. But it's just has really heightened the awareness and it's forced all of us to really take a look at a product. The bill of materials you talk about, we know it as the BOM, right? The bill of material of any product. And if there's 8 or 10 or 12 components to make one product, where's the material coming from? Where's the labor coming from? Where's the packaging coming from? So on and so forth, and where it's being shipped to. All that impacts the price. And so the folks that are producing products, we have to look at everything as a landed cost, not only to us, but where it's going to end up. In this case, if it's the U.S. with most of my baby clients that we have. And so they've become a lot more savvy. So their purchasing departments have really having to, be really sharp and sharpen their pencil to make sure that they can maintain prices. Because again, as I mentioned previously, not every product has or every product has a price elasticity, and some things just look like a $10 item. You can't charge $30 for it, or you just won't sell any. And if it's a $100 item, can you raise it up to 110? Possibly, right? And so there's a lot of that kind of conversation going on that I hear behind, kind of behind the scenes, if you will.
So Hector, if I can add something to that, somebody put in the chat, what's going to happen in the future? One of the things that is very, very apparent to me is from a geopolitical point of view is the U.S. administration prime objective is to reshore as much as it can using tariffs as a tool. Other countries need to balance out their tariffs with the United States, or that will become a problem for those other countries from a tariff point of view. At the end of the day, China is the key target for the administration, and using tariffs, it forces people like yourselves into a position to be on the front line to make decisions on products, no matter how big or how small, as to where they are going to be manufactured and what the degree of pain is in between. And pricing used to be that. Now, tariffs are replacing pricing. And products that were made very, very low and inexpensive are now being bumped up via tariffs to a process that may be parallel to that if it's manufactured in the United States. So I think at the end of the day, all the pain and angst that we're going through is going to be towards how much of that comes back here and how much other countries balance and treat the United States at the same level. And in between that, China is the target at every level because for the last 20, 25 years, they have captured the manufacturing world. And the smaller stuff, okay, in Asia, but the bigger stuff, the tactical stuff, this administration wants that back here, and tariffs are going to be the tool.
Okay, and I sure, I don't know if everybody's reading that question and Hector and Glenn, but okay. I would like to hear your opinions from what do you predict the future will bring? And then the second question is, have the impact so far been more positive or negative for the average American? So I'm gonna also, share opinions, ideas on this. Basically, to predict the future, I agree with my colleagues in the panel, with Hector and Glenn. It's very difficult to predict. The geopolitics, we don't know exactly what those will be, but Glenn made a lot of really good points about it, about China. What I'm seeing here and going to in between that first and second question is, what I have seen here, what we have seen here, that you can look at it from, I tend to look at it that it is negatively impacting, and it is. There are investments on the sidelines. That's what I've seen. And those investments are binational investments. For example, any company that starts doing some sub-assembly across the line here, across the border in Nogales, Mexico, or in Hermosillo, the benefit of doing that trickles back to the US because you have the warehousing, the in and out, the transportation on the US side. You also have a lot of companies that are doing, that's why it's called the binational, the shared production, like the maquiladoras are at some point have been called shared production because you have companies that are doing, if they're going to build this thermal to sell to their customers in the US, they do a part of it in Mexico and a part of it in the US. They may do a sub-assembly in Mexico that they bring back to the US and put it into the finished good. I mean, that happens a lot in the automotive sector. So I've seen that there are investments on the sidelines. They're waiting for clarity. Which a lot of business people are looking for that. If the tariff, you looked at the flow charts and you looked at how many, there's a lot of scenarios. I think that a lot of businesses are looking for, hey, if it's going to be 10, if it's going to be 15, if it's going to be 20, whatever the number is, set it in stone and give me clear rules. Based on those rules, I will update my business plan and move forward. I think that's something that hopefully, in case you haven't heard, USMCA is up for renegotiation in 2026. There are conversations going on already, back office conversations on that. But I think that's going to be really important. That is, three countries negotiate, come up with the best agreement for the three of us, and then move forward with it and have the clarity in the rules of the game, because that is going to make a huge difference. Having that is going to make a big difference.
So, Fernando, I think clarity is unfortunately what we're not going to get. And I think that's by design. And I think that I wish clarity would be in this and we'd be able to solve it. But the other way to look at this, other than all the pain that is being put forward, it's sort of like losing weight. It's very painful to do, but the end result comes. It's like buying a car, very painful to finance, but the end result. So I look at this from an optimist's point of view. From change comes opportunity. Now, the question is, it's sort of like the stock market. When it goes up and it comes down, it's painful either way, but opportunity comes in. I believe some very, very smart people have opportunities right now to stop talking about the pain and figure out how to fix the solution and get through this woe is me thing and focus on the solution of moving forward. I know it's a painful discussion to have, but I think it's sort of like when you're sitting in a place like Arizona and you're moaning and you're upset about the federal government. Technically, you only have a couple of things you can do about it, but you can do things within your scope of capacity with whatever you do. And those kinds of changes at those kinds of levels eventually work their way up back into the system. So my advice is to everybody on this call, stop moaning about everything and try and come up with solutions for it. And that to me is the solution for everything.
Absolutely. I concur with Glenn in that there's a lot of opportunities, like in our case, the first week of March, for example, it was a nightmare because the first week of March was the week where everything was tariffed. And we had a lot of customers that put a hold on shipments. But what came out of it is that we are now seeing, as I said a few minutes ago, we are now seeing more bonded cargo volume. So, okay, that's something. So you definitely, you need to stay positive, roll up your sleeves, in our case, with the regulations to understand, study in depth, so you understand and then adapt and offer better solutions. There's a question here that says, is it possible to take a single product, break it down by contents, and show materials that make up that product? Which materials are subjected to tariffs per country for the finished product and packaging before it ends up on a Target shelf? So the answer is if you're going to bring that as a finished good, depends on what country is going to be considered a country of origin. That's going to determine if the product is going to be durable in the US and by how much. But you cannot say, oh, this product has 5 components. I brought it into Target, and of the 5 components, 3 are from Mexico, 1 is from China, 1's from Germany. And no, you're not going to pay the duty rate for Mexico on the 3 Mexican components, the China duty rate on the Chinese component, and the duty rate for Germany. No, it has to do with the finished good. Hector,
And
you
just to
want to
add
add
to that,
anything to
Fernando,
that?
yeah, exactly. I think, just to add to that, again, I've used the numbers of 60%. So 60% of the wholesale price that a company is actually paying for it to get it imported, or in this case, exported to the United States, has to be North American. So 40% of the cost of the wholesale cost can be, whether it's made in China or Germany, to the example that you mentioned, Fernando. But again, as long as it's 60% or more North American, then there's no duty on it. And so that's how you have to look at it. Using the example that you talked about, one component being Chinese, one being German, and the rest being Mexican, for example. As long as it's 60% or more North American, you're going to be able to bring it into the U.S. without duty. I think that's the important thing that people have to look at.
Glenn, anything you want to add to that on from the Canadian side?
No, but I would like to answer one of the questions that says, why is the deliberate goal not clarity? I think it is clarity, but I believe that clarity within control of what you can do. There is a time frame on this that we don't know how long this is going to last, how short it could be. And I mean, clarity would be fantastic. I just don't see clarity coming from this administration. Lack of clarity is a tool that is being implemented right now. And that is something that we see from a Canadian point of view every day when we sit and try to get things down to a point where we can understand what to do. It's almost like another wrench is thrown in, and it's problem solving. It's very complex problem solving on a moving target.
There you go. So for whomever asked that question about the product landing at a target shelf, and through the chat, I added, the comment about suggesting a detailed review of tariff engineering for those cases. That's what we suggest, that you look at the BOM or bill of materials and analyze in detail where every component is coming in from. You got to look at the rule of origin for the specific product. You need to do that to come up with a strategy as to if whomever presented that question, let's assume if you're a vendor for Target, that's what you ought to do. If you're reselling to Target and you're sourcing your product from outside the US, that's what I would suggest. You break down the product, as you said on your question, on the bill of materials, and then you classify each of the components, know which country it comes from, and then look at the rule of origin for the finished good. That's going to help you determine how to maneuver and what is your best strategy. Because at the end of the day, like Hector mentioned a few times, you want to provide the best possible landed cost to Target so they keep buying from you. And of course, you don't erode your profit margins. There's another question. I don't know, Hector and Glenn, if you read that, but it basically says, from an economic development point of view, how can we in Arizona have an umbrella to protect ourselves from the tariff storm? I'll start with a quick comment regarding workforce development, because you talk about here about economic development. I would say is being very nimble, pivoting as fast as we can for changes. So, for example, knock on wood, with the tomatoes, if that starts hitting, like especially where I am, Santa Cruz County, with hitting, that the companies bring in a lower volume of tomatoes because of the anti-dumping duty. Well, one quick thing I would say is talk to Glenn and see if the amount, increase sales to Canada. I mean, that would be a quick thing to do. Increase sales to Canadian customers and ship it inbound. That would be a quick, like umbrella to protect Arizona from the tariff storm.
Fernando, what we're seeing from a Canadian way to do that, and I think I mentioned this earlier, we have now 500 Canadian companies operating in Arizona, and the Canadians are moving, again, solutions are key. So they are moving companies into Arizona at a rate that we have never seen before, and they are investing at a rate we've never seen before. It's similar to what we're watching with TSMC. So part of the solution is understanding what the administration wants, dealing with that, adapting to it, and figuring out solutions that you can come up with that are good for you and your client within the regulations of lack of clarity, because that's just not going to happen for a while.
Yeah, if I can add as well, I think there's a couple ways to look at this thing with the tariffs from a brand perspective or a client that's buying wholesale, whether it's coming out of Asia or coming out of Mexico or Canada. But I think, is it positive or negative for the end user, for the consumer? Well, I mean, we've seen prices go up, so the impact is a negative one, right? Right. I think we're seeing prices of everything have gone up. Whether or not some of these brands are paying more because of tariff, or they're just jacking it up because it's an opportunity to get more margin. But we're seeing everything kind of, consistently has gone up, whether it's groceries, whether it's automobiles, or whether it's, in my business, baby products and what have you, anything that's consumable. So we're seeing tariff has had a negative impact on the price of goods, no matter what the industry, I think is one of the biggest things. Opportunity if you're in the manufacturing space, if you're in Mexico, Canada, or US, that you can hopefully pick up some business that maybe is being done in the other parts of the world. There's a positive there, but it's a negative by and large because we're seeing price impacts go up. My opinion.
Thank you so much. We're coming towards the end of our forum, and I would like to thank in particular our moderator, Fernando Sandoval, and our panelists, Glenn Williamson and Hector Placencia, for this fascinating subject and all the information that they shared with us today. I'll now turn the forum back over to Tara Jackson.
Thanks so much, Linda. Yes, I have learned a lot, and what is clear is that there won't be clarity. Very interesting, informative, and I can't thank the panel enough, as well as the Nelson Family Charitable Trust for being our financial sponsor for these programs. If you like these types of programs, or if you like in-person programs, just a little preview, we will have more programs next year, these virtual ones through our international committee, with whatever topic is we believe is most important for everyone to hear about. Our official topic for Arizona Town Hall next year is housing. We always pick the topics that seem to be most relevant at the time, right? And we will have a few more workforce development in-person programs earlier in the year, one with Boys Club, Girls Club. We have some others in Mojave County and the White Mountains. So if you're interested in those, just go to our website. And we have a capstone program March 4th, where we will talk about sort of the summary of all the different discussions we've had on workforce development. It's been very interesting. And of course, this will be part of it. So with that, I just want to say thanks again to everyone. I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday season, and that the prices of the goods you pay are as low as possible, and that you have lots of flexibility and big umbrellas over your head. So thanks again, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, and hope to see you in Nogales.
Yes, we're working on that.
Absolutely.